All right. Hello, everyone. LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, everyone out there in the internets. This is Marcus Aurelius Higgs, M. Aurelius Higgs with, I'll let you introduce yourself, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. Really exciting to be live. I think it's first time for me, so this is a new experience. My name is Mark
Okay.
van den Einde. I'm based in Switzerland. I'm the founder of Being at Full Potential and the co-author of this brand new book, Coming Home to Who You Are: Education
Per-
Re-Enlightened.
Boom. There you go, right there, sir. Yes, this is my first time live on LinkedIn, I think. I did something earlier, but then I'm natural in front of the camera, and we've had many of these conversations before, so this is just another Tuesday on a Friday, but yeah. So, as you mentioned, we are co-authors of this wonderful book, Coming Home to Who You Are, Education Reimagined, and I'll pull up the cover here. I'm working with a new system. Boom. Our cover was illustrated by Monia. How do you say her last name again? Per-
Pereira.
Pereira. This has been a coming together of many serendipitous. I started this when I was in Thailand. Um, I myself, an American Bahamian, half Filipino. I'll mix up myself. You yourself, tell us about a bit about your background.
Yeah, so I also have sort of, I'm not from one place in particular. I was born in Canada. I have Dutch parents. I live in Switzerland. My wife is Chinese, so it's like a beautiful mix. And I think we both felt that we wanted to capture that multicultural dimension in the characters of this book as well. So, it's a fascinating story how we met. And I think it would be kind of nice to share that as a starting point. Like how did we come together, and how do we've never met in person, and yet we've been collaborating for 2 years straight on this book.
Yeah.
And it is indeed a serendipitous encounter, and it's been such a joyful collaboration. And I think we both brought some very unique elements to this joint project. Um, I can start maybe just to give a little bit of background. I
Sure.
My son started university 2 years ago, and engineering student, and at a university in Zurich, which is where the story takes place. So there are definitely some linkages to real life situations. But
Mhm.
I remember him coming home from university and not being inspired at all. And I remember
Mm,
having conversations with him before starting. I was like, "You're going to love this, right? Because now you can finally focus on something that you're really interested in. It's not like school where you have to take all kinds of, or like high school, where you have to take all kinds of classes. Some of them you like, some of them you don't. In university, you can really go deeper into what you're passionate about." So I thought he was going to really enjoy that experience, and it was kind of the opposite. It was just this sense of like not feeling inspired, this lack of meaning, and why am I going to school? I can figure all this out on my own. So there was this sense of like something is off with the education system. And as a father, I was trying to process that. And of course, I can't change things, but I did have
mhm.
some ideas on what it could look like, and how it could evolve in the future going forward. And so, the writing process for me has been really a way of imagining an alternative model of education, and sort of sensing into that as we have gone about the writing process. And it's been very empowering, actually, and
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to sharing this also with the younger generation. So that's
Awesome.
a little bit of my background context.
Your background as it relates to the story. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I met you, I was in Thailand. I myself was a high school teacher, um, teaching fifth grade at the time, but I was a high school grade 12 and grade 9 teacher. And I felt similar sentiments from my students as they were transitioning into college. Unfortunately, there was an incident at at with one of our students who went on to college, and he made a life decision that was irreversible. And there's this growing sentiment of, yeah, who am I? This is a life thing, right? We wrote this
Mm,
book for humanity, and we touch on elements of that. But I feel in the zeitgeist of humanity right now, there's this growing feeling of what is it? What does all this mean? With the speed up of technology and information,
mm,
with screens pulling our attention, and I think we wrote a book that is reflective of the work that we do. And just to tell you a bit about my work, I am the founder of Certain Future Press. The only thing certain about the future is there will be change. And how will we meet that change? It is from the inside out with our character. Um, I love the word character in that character means the mark that you will make as the instrument, as well as the mark you make. It is a notch, a character. So we bring about change while dancing with that change and experiencing it too. And before getting all philosophical and everything, but that's what we did in this book. We organized our ideas and our thoughts in collaboration back and forth with our different perspectives. And I love your life experience that you brought to this. I love my contribution to it and the refining of my thoughts and the contribution. That's what collaboration does.
mm.
And yeah, this has been a wonderful project that I'm looking forward to sharing. A month and a half, a year and a half, we've been working together, right? Not 2 years yet. With still this book to be released in August. So leading up to that, we're going to do these 23 interviews, these 23 podcasts, going over the 23 chapters um, of the book. Interesting how 23 has been a reoccurring number with us.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
indeed. And
Yeah.
also I just want to do
And
a
you're,
quick shout out.
eh,
Mhm.
go ahead, Marcus. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say a quick shout out to Michael, who actually did introduce us. I I was he's a colleague and friend inside Heroic, the group that we're in, and he said, "You know, who you need to meet. You need to meet Mark." And he did not make a formal introduction. However, I downloaded your book and I read your book. It was your book of, I don't know, would
The
you call
being
it poetry?
entrepreneur. The being
Yeah.
entrepreneur. Mm.
It it, well, there was poetry in the book,
Yeah.
but there was a reflection of yourself in the book talking about your transition from marketing into entrepreneurship and being a highly sensitive person and so on. And a lot of it resonated with me. And I just reached out to you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're like, hey, what are you working on? And I said, well, nothing in particular at the moment, but I write. It's not that I wasn't working on anything, but yeah, I write. And then this somewhat, we found ourselves here a year and a half later.
Well, you write, and you shared with me your book of poetry, which is,
Yes.
an amazing collection of poetry that really inspired me, and it is also very much tuned into, I think, what so many people of us are feeling today, and you able to put words to it in such a creative and artistic way, then it just resonated deeply with me. And I think we got in touch with each other's writing projects, and from there this new story emerged, right? And yeah, I'm excited to talk about it, to introduce some of the characters, and um, go through this chapter by chapter and unfold this together through conversation.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Last thing I'll say is uh, we always say writing a book is like having a conversation with the author. And now it's the author's having a conversation about the book as we build up to it. Um, and one thing I also said before this was, books don't make money, they make relationships. And one It made a relationship with us as we were figuring it out. And then now, especially as a collaboration, I'm not crying. I have something in my eye, just so you know. But yeah, it this is now making a relationship here, as well as when we put this out into the world. The intention of the book is to create conversations, right? Let's look at some of the themes of the book before we delve deeper into it, into the cast of characters. For this next hour, um, hour and a half, we're going to look at the first the themes, the messages, and then we'll look at the cast of characters and then go over the first two chapters. Yeah. Coming home to who you are. So off the top of your head, what would you say some of the messages of the book were? In as as topics. What topics do we delve into in this book?
Well, I think the main one is that there is a whole aspect of education that has been um, kind of non-existent until now, or at least really deep, underexpressed, and that is the inner path of education, learning about who we are. Um, what is important to us? What are we passionate about? What are our values? You mentioned character. How do we make a difference in the world? What is our purpose in life? Some of these really fundamental questions that should be the foundation for all of us as human beings to build a life around are sort of things that are deprioritized in the traditional education system and left to the individual to go and do on their own if they choose to and if they have time and energy to do that. And I guess what we are putting forward here is a version of education where that actually becomes the central point, is that journey home to be fully aware and in touch and to be able to fully explore the inner dimensions of who we are and to give space for
Mm,
that. And it doesn't mean that the pendulum swings all the way to the other side and that we don't put any focus on the technical development and skill development, et cetera. But that there is a better balance there. And there is a tremendous yearning. I think that's another theme, is that the younger generation is very much yearning for that as part of, I think the process, the evolutionary process that we're in right now, that, this is very, very evident with the younger generation. And, and the very rapidly increasing technological developments, right? These exponential
yeah.
technologies like AI, quantum computing, all these things that are just changing everything, right? In the way we work, and also in the education space. So this is giving us an opportunity to reimagine what education can look like in partnership, in collaboration with AI, for example, right?
Yeah.
That it is an enabler, but that it does require us to rethink the purpose of universities, rethink the purpose of higher education. And I
Mm.
think in this story, we're showing not the solution to it, but a possible way in which this evolution could become reality.
A reimagining of it, just as we said, yeah, reimagining. I want to say hi to London, to the LinkedIn user. I don't know. Can you see that, Mark?
I can see that. Yes. Hello from London.
Okay.
Hello. Hello there. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for
So
joining.
educating. Thank you for joining. Yeah, education is one topic. We also touch on, and I'm going to tie these three back together after we mention them. But parenting. Our story starts off with a father and son in India, and it's bookended by a father and son in India. But in there, there's also the dean and his daughter. And I think elements of your life story came out in that, as you know, being a parent, as you mentioned, and your son going off to university. and my own upbringing with my father, who is also an educator. Are either of your parents educators, Mark? I'm just wondering.
Well, not in the traditional sense, but as parents, they're educators. Yeah. So I think that's also like a
Yeah.
rethinking of educator, that it's not just in this context of a school, but we're all educators, right? And we're all learners.
So the etymology of the word parent means to bring forth also, as well as ed educe. To educate means to bring forth. And the other thing that I wanted to tie into that was actually creator. Creator means to bring forth. So all of it is emerging from the inside out. When you look at the word creator, education, or parent. Yeah. Uh, Another topic that we touched on is a very strong point of identity, of who you are, being both third culture. I don't like the word kid, but multicultural individuals. Our line of work and how we were brought up. Um, a sense of who you are in this space, in this space. How do you show up and what do you do? What's expected of you? Um, it was an element of culture was in there. Let, let me ask you this. You 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 have just come from India recently. You did a trip there. You did your schooling in Canada. You were brought up
Canada.
in Canada, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Where were you born? Um, just want to.
Also in Canada,
Okay. Okay. And then now you live in Zurich, um,
in Switzerland. Yeah.
in Switzerland. When speaking of culture, what is a truism for you, or what is something that you think is quite unique? Because you've experienced this again and again and again. When speaking of culture, what do you usually think of? Or what is your
I
unique
think
take on
of,
it?
yeah, I think of like nuances, things that give color to our our daily expression of who we are. It's like the clothes that we wear, you know, and
Hmm.
and a different culture will have different colors and different expressions, different styles and everything. But the person inside is the same person. And I think of culture that way as well, is that, at a deep level, we have a shared, there's a shared humanity, there's a shared yearning that we have, and there's so many things that unite us across cultures, and there's so many things obviously that also differentiate us when at more of the surface layer. But what I find so beautiful is that despite being from lots of different places, and not having like, I am from here, I don't have that sense of like, this is home at a physical
Hmm.
point of view. But I do feel a sense of home no matter where I am. And I think that that has come from just growing into my own sense, right? Like really accepting and embracing my uniqueness. So yeah, it's like, I appreciate culture, but it doesn't. It never feels like it's like a barrier to be able to participate wherever I am. It's like a,
Mm.
yeah.
And maybe even if not a barrier, maybe it's a lens like you can take off. You, you have your perspective, your view, but it's a lens that you put in front of it that can shade it in one way, or
Yeah.
another lens that you could put on that shades it another way.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And finally, I'll touch on this point. You somewhat touched on it, the idea of home. The story is called Coming Home to Who You Are.
Yeah.
In grade 12, we had a topic or a unit called Home Away from Home. And we had this, what we call essential question. And it's not meant to be answered, or there's not a final answer, but it's something that makes you think. And the question was, what is home? Is it a state of being? Is it a place? Is it a
Mm.
person? Is it a feeling? And when we start the unit, we say, okay, what are some adjectives that you think of when you think of home? If you all are listening out there, what are some adjectives that you think of when you think of home? And let me ask that to you, Mark, before we go on with this idea. When you think of home, what do you think of? And I'll just throw one out there. I think of warm.
Yeah, warmth for sure. You know,
Hmm.
I like to think it in contrast to a house, right? A house
Okay.
and a home. You know, a home is warm. It's there's a sense of um, of ease and
Mm,
flow that comes with being at home, and not have to hide. You know, no masks are needed when
okay.
you're home. You can just fully be yourself. Um,
So belonging,
belonging,
acceptance.
belonging.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, ease, you said, belonging. I said warm. You said acceptance. Um, anything else?
yeah. Flow.
Flow.
You get into your flow. Uh,
Hmm. Familiarity.
it's like a foundation that allows, you know, a good home is like a foundation that allows us to stretch out of our comfort zones, right?
It
So it
helps us.
also is that it's also that springboard for adventure and for being able to stretch, right? And to move into places that, you know, we feel drawn to,
Hmm.
but maybe wouldn't, you know, necessarily go there if we didn't have that solid foundation, right? That solid feeling of like, I know, you know, in this case, it's like I really know who I am. I'm very much grounded in my values and my essence. And therefore, you know, whatever comes my way, I'll find my way through it. You know, I'll know how to deal with it, how to respond to it.
Yeah.
So it's a source of strength, I would also say. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna couple that with what was said by our LinkedIn viewer. It said authenticity.
Yeah.
So to author something means to write it. So then it's a source of where we have strength to actually create from. I like how you said that home actually is a place where we venture from. It's a
Yeah.
a launch off, if you will.
Yeah. And we can come
Yeah,
back to it, right? Yeah.
and we can come back to it. Now, if we go back to our essential question of is it a place, is it a person, is it a state of being? If we say coming home to who you are, it's a place where we feel warm, where we belong, where we feel accepted, where we can author from and go out.
Hmm.
If we see that as ourselves, if we are home.
Yeah.
And like you said, being a person of many cultures, it's like when you can find your identity here, if that's your home.
Yeah.
Hmm, yeah. And then seeing if we can find that in people and then finding it in a place. I guess home is also it's a place that's familiar because you come to it often.
And that's the thing, like it's already there within us.
Mm,
You know, we've lost touch with it. And I think that's also an interesting part of the education system is
okay.
that it actually, you know, it adds all these layers. And at some point, you know, the more we go to school, the more we study, the more we learn and the more layers get sort of added, the more
Hmm.
difficult it is to really be in touch with that essence, right? The spirit inside of all of us. And so, you know, I think this journey back home, it's not about removing the layers, but it's about, you know, going, well, maybe it is a bit about removing the layers, but it's
Um,
rediscovering what's always been there, right? What is already there within, rather than this being something, okay, oh, it's another layer we need to add, you know, it's that layer of home, we need to add that. No, it's already there. It's that core that we may have lost touch with over the years. So it's about rediscovering it, reconnecting with it, and that actually is part of education, right? That is part of growing and learning and developing ourselves. Um,
the way I like to think of it is emergent. That's the word that always comes to mind, emerge.
Mm.
Because I think there's an approach to education, because education means to bring forth, but there's an approach to education whereas, like you said, working what is there already and then bringing forth what is more.
Yep.
Because in,
Yep.
in our story, remember when they go with their mentor, and we'll introduce us to the cast of players momentarily. But when they go to the mentor, he's like, "Who are you first?"
Yep.
A good teacher first listens to ground the education inside the learner, because you can only learn from the thing that's most relevant is from your being.
Yep.
So he gets to know them first, knows why, what it means to them. And then he's like, okay, here's this project based learning, but here's this project. And I want you to use your being to meet this project.
Mm.
So when we ground a lesson or when we present a lesson or something, it always has to be student centered or learner
Mm-hmm.
centered.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's where that's okay. Now we're getting into pedagogy and education theory and all that. But that's how all real good education happens. Now in the age of AI, um, how quickly can we do that? How quickly can we get there? And well, let's
It's
jump
an
into our
it's
story.
an imperative. It's an imperative. I think that this
Tell me
is
about that.
like the AI revolution is, in a way, it's not leaving us any other option than to embrace more fully our unique humanness, right? It,
Okay,
I think that's the beauty of this as well. The fact that
talk to me.
we're creating this story now, just
Hmm.
as we're seeing AI pop up everywhere and be the just this revolutionary movement, that
Hmm.
this is the time for us to
Have this
go on
conversation.
that journey back home, right? To fully embrace our humanness, because that's how we're going to be able um, to continue to add value in collaboration with these technologies, right? That's the way we're going to be able to direct them in ways that are serving us and humanity. So I
Hmm.
think just this, the whole timing of it, um, is, yeah, it just also feels very, very right. We're doing this now.
Yeah, yeah. This is a book for this particular time, and it's worth mentioning that AI did play a large part in writing the book. Um, well, it helped us get the ideas out quicker.
Hmm.
We were using
Absolutely.
Novel Crafter. We came up with a synopsis. We came up with our characters, and then we said, okay, we put them on the page, and then we created the conflict and said, what do we want to see in the end? And yeah, the whole writing process. So we don't have pictures for them right now. However, let's go through our cast of characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So starting it off, we have Kenna Patel. Please tell me about Kenna Patel.
Yeah. So Kenna is an engineering student,
Hmm.
um, from India, and he has a very, I would say, um, yeah, a conditioned sense of what success looks like, and it
Don't we
is
all?
yeah,
Go
and it is in conflict with, I think, what is emergent within him and the yearning within him. So there is this tension between what he has been told
ahead.
is success and what what he should be aiming for, and this yearning within him that feels very different, but he doesn't have words for it yet. And so the book really starts off with Kenna and his, the friction that he's feeling within him in that university setting. So he's the main character.
Hmm.
Then I would say the other important character is the Professor Amar, who really
Hmm.
represents this visionary educator. The person who is already seeing that the system today is not serving the students and is not preparing them for the future that is already there ahead of us, and who is, really championing a new way of approaching education within the system. So he's like an internal change agent, and he's empowering Kenna and his friends to take on new initiatives within their program that will, allow them to experiment and play and learn and go on that journey. Um,
Yeah.
so those are, I would say, the two main characters. What would you add to that, Marcus?
Hey, um, there are Kenna's two friends that we're going to mention. And before we move on, I want to acknowledge this LinkedIn comment who said, when we're talking
Mm.
about education, they said, isn't that a bit of like the Montessori system?
Hmm.
Are you familiar with the Montessori system
Yeah,
or
yeah,
Montessori schooling?
yeah. Montessori.
Okay. I think this education is always the same. The good education. Well, good is adding a judgment to it, but it is learner focused. And in this book, it's like the Montessori system, except the Montessori approach, except at a university level. And that the professor says, "Hey, who are you? What do you want to do? I'll create the
Mm.
environment for you to do that." As a teacher,
Mm.
we say we don't give them information. We create the environment for learning to take place. But okay, so back to our characters. We have Alex, his Swiss German friend, and you educated me a bit on what Swiss German is, because I just thought it was a person who was mixed, but no, there are layers to it. And then we have Rosie. Sorry, Alex. He is a business major. He has his own startup doing his thing, and he's dividing his attention between trying to do this of doing this startup while also supporting his friend Kenna, who's going through not an existential crisis, but figuring out himself. And then you have Rosie. Rosie is this Bahamian German poet. She is also an engineering student. She's the not feisty. She's the life. She's the flavor. She's the bit of joy that adds spice to the story. Because yeah, she's also encouraging. She sprinkles poetry throughout the story. Let me ask you this: where do you see yourself in these characters, and what elements of them? And I'll share where I see myself, but I
Yeah,
see you a bit through there. Yeah.
yeah. So I definitely relate to the Professor Amar. This change agent. The one who shakes things up a little bit internally, and who, is taking a stand for an alternative way of approaching education, a more human-centric one. He's a researcher. He's developing these new models and approaches. In the book, we actually speak about the human potential house and the framework, which is one of the things that he's been developing, and that's obviously, or not obviously, but that's very much aligned to my work with being at full potential. So I've written myself a little bit in through the character of Amar. I also love that he knows when, at some point in the story, he decides that he's outgrown that, that role, and he
Hmm.
also knows when to move on, right? And when to, um, uh, yeah, when to move on. And I think that, there's many aspects of his journey in the story that um, I could I could relate to my own story over the years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, and we often would come back to this, but you have a video out on YouTube talking about um, of a story you wrote, and I always come back to that when I think of
Mm,
where where Amar was at that moment and his introspection. Yeah,
mm.
yeah. I find
And what about
myself,
for you? Yeah.
well, I find myself in Amar as well at moments. Um, Sometimes Kenna, sometimes Alex. Like I can see myself in them. And then of course Rosie. I mean Rosie does poetry and I always do poetry.
Yeah.
Um, Not yet the dean. Do you see yourself a bit in the dean, or maybe when he's in his father role, right?
Yeah, definitely as father's role. So that's another character is the
Tell us a
dean.
bit about the dean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we can speak a bit about the dean. So there's the dean who's navigating, the pressures external from the donors and the people who have a certain agenda on what the education or what the university stands for and the traditions, etc. And he sees like that there's this new energy that's bubbling up within the school, within the university. And so he's kind of caught in between these, maintain the tradition, maintain the status quo, and challenging the status quo and challenging and wanting to innovate and to create something new. And he has to walk this sort of fine line. And I think the moment where he really comes to clarity on what he's going to stand for is when through the relationship with his daughter, and when he sees like in his own personal life that you know when his daughter opens up to him and is sharing a bit about her own personal story, that he realizes this is not an isolated thing that's happening in his school, but that this is part of what younger generation are experiencing and feeling. And I think that personal aspect is what gets him to become a champion as well eventually. So it's
Mm.
it's a very interesting dynamic between him and his daughter.
We actually named him Dean Pilot, and I don't. Do you remember why? Because I remember us saying this.
Well, what comes to mind right now is that eventually there is a pilot project that gets brought to life, but maybe that's not what you were thinking.
No, that wasn't what I was thinking. But there,
Mm.
yeah, there's a pilot project that comes on. It's because he was making a decision, and he's making a decision saying, it's out of my hands, and I wash my hands of it. It's
Mm.
a biblical allusion to Pilate, who's just like,
Oh
hey,
yeah,
I have to do this, and it's not me who wants to do this, but the powers above me are forcing me to do this.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it wasn't until he understands, oh, this is how it's affecting us at home. Like, what
yeah,
role do I play in this?
yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's
Let's
like
see.
disempowering, right? You lose that sense of, you're just doing what you're told. And I think through the story, he realized that he has agency as well, and that he has the power uh, to to move things as without and do it in a way that is productive, right? And is taking people
Hmm.
along with him. That he doesn't, yeah, that
Yeah.
we have that ability to um, to change things.
Change things. I love how we. That's another thing we come back to. Because I mean, story is change happens and we give it meaning. That's all a story
Mm.
is. And I always look at things in the lens of empowerment and disempowerment. And yeah, to say I'm just doing this because somebody else wants it, you're not acknowledging your sovereignty or what you want. That also touches on his daughter Ellie or Ella.
Mhm.
She's seeing AI coming and she sees all the problems of the world and
Mm.
she feels overwhelmed. She's a high schooler and she's like, "What are we gonna do?" Um, of course, it's written better inside the book,
There's going to be no
but
jobs anymore. Why am I even going to
yeah,
school? Yeah,
yeah. And she stops
yeah.
playing the
We're all
piano.
going to grow up, in a couple of years.
There's and there's still space for us to add to this book. I want us to add a piece about anxiety
Mm.
because that's what his daughter's experiencing.
Hmm.
And if to touch on that real quick, problems are inherent, but we get anxious when we feel they're insurmountable and we're not directed at one problem that we feel called to. His daughter starts to manage her anxiety towards the end when she has a different relationship with AI, and it comes through in the conversation, in her actions, and so on. Yeah, that's an interesting arc that she has as well.
Yeah.
So let's see.
And
We Go
yeah.
on.
I mean, there's what I love as well is how these traditional relationships like father daughter, where the father is the authority, and as a child we listen, but there's also that the beauty of how the that the daughter becomes a source of inspiration for the father, right?
Mm,
And
mhm,
he starts to listen to her, and he starts to appreciate her wisdom. And I feel like that's also a really important theme going in this book, is like appreciating the wisdom that we all have within ourselves, irrespective of our age, right? And a level of experience that we have. It's not the one that has the most knowledge that necessarily has all the answers, right? And that the answers are already within us. And like that is, I think, is a beautiful evolution of the father as well. Um,
mm,
we see that a little bit with Kenna and his father. That relationship as well is also very interesting dynamic. Where he breaks free in a way, but it's
mhm.
not that you leave your father behind and you kind of disown that, but it's you stand firm in who you are, and that relationship then gets transformed um, by itself almost, right? But
The,
yeah.
man, so the beautiful thing about Kenna and his father is, so his we establish it in the first chapter with his father saying, this is what education means to our family, and we'll actually open up the chapter in a moment. Um, I love towards the end the arc where his father said, my dad didn't tell me what to do with my education. He just made sure that I had one. And that's more towards a resolution.
Mhm.
But at the beginning, it's established, um, hey, this is what's valuable to us. This is what's important to our family. And
Mhm.
people like us do things like this. In a story, you need an antagonist. And while we do put that inside Kenna versus, not versus university, but it's really an internal conflict of that voice of his father and himself, and honoring. I don't know if
I think you hit the jackpot.
hey, there you go. In honoring both of those, and I do say at the end, the resolution is that he does honor both of those,
Yeah.
but trying to find that resolution in there. Yeah. Let's see. We have the friends. We have. Go on.
Yeah, let's maybe look into the first chapter.
Boom.
um the start of the book, like how does this get kicked off? Well, how does a story start?
Do you want to
What kind
start with
of
the prologue?
um I think you just spoke about that. We can maybe,
Okay.
yeah, the father and the son, the expectations, so it's setting up Ken as a young boy. And you get a sense of how he's being conditioned, how he's being sort of how, yeah, like how he has become who he is at this
Hmm.
point. um but
And
then the first chapter starts when he's like in second year university, so it's like 10 years or 20 years later, 15 years later.
yeah.
And and it's where he's feeling this discomfort right inside, between what he's supposed to do and supposed to feel and supposed to be enjoying, and yet it's not there. There's an emptiness, there's a void inside.
Well, even before that, there's an outward breaking of his world. It's
Yes.
it's called the day it all broke. That's actually
Yes.
the first chapter.
Yeah.
Um, so to the audience, for everybody who's on the LinkedIn list, we'll have your email and we'll send you the first three chapters. We'll have this conversation for the next 23 weeks, and we'll be dripping out chapter by chapter as we go through. And we'll have a QR code for those who aren't to get onto a mailing list. We just didn't set up the mailing list before this. But in the day it all broke, Kenna has this prototype for water purification, and everybody is there cheering him on. And we see the cast of characters actually coming for this event. And when he goes to turn on this prototype, this water purification system, um, catastrophe happens. It it literally falls apart. Recruiters are there. Let me build up the moment. So the recruiters are there. Um, Dean is there. Dean Pilot. He's announcing it. This is their senior and sophomore project. So, hey, I'm Rita from India. Good to see
Hello,
you.
Amrita. Great that you can join.
Wonderful to see you here. And while he's setting it up as an engineer, he's like, "Hey, I have to get this. I have to do this right because this will actually secure my spot for an internship." And he's going to turn it on, and then the machine, for reasons inside the text as you read it, starts whirring and sputtering and spraying water everywhere. And there's the water starts creeping towards the electrical outlet. Security guard pulls out the cord, and we're left with Kenna there in a pool of his own water with his own machine that's broken. His friend Alex trying to reach out to help, but he's snapping back at Alex, and he feels totally dejected in a very outward sense, like his world literally fell apart.
Hmm.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think indeed the outer world falling apart is sort of a precursor to the inner world needing attention. I think it's a sign that something needs to be looked at.
So
Yeah,
I'm I'm just gonna read the last paragraph and then we'll talk about the second paragraph.
yeah.
So it said, um, the rest of the showcase continued in the adjacent hall. The sounds of successful presentations drifted in like mockery. Kenna stayed behind to mop up the little pride he had left. The puddles eventually disappeared, but the stain on his spirit, that would take longer to clean. He thought he thought of conversations he'd have to have with his father, explaining why the Patel name wouldn't be appearing on any presentation internships roster this summer. There are some failures no amount of mopping could erase. Yeah. So we start with our broken Kenna.
Yeah.
How will we rebuild him? Right.
Yeah.
And we start off with Kenna and the price of silence. Let me just. Here goes an illustration by Monia. And we have him Kenna standing up in Professor Della's class. Here's Rosie with her afro. Uh,
I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore.
who said that?
Well, I think that's what Kenna said, right? I can't do this, Kenna.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Kenna whispered under his lips, but he stood up. His chair screeched, and he just couldn't handle the the ongoing equations on the board, and there was so much dissonance to what he was experiencing inside that he physically disturbs the classroom by standing up in the middle of it, and everyone looks at him. Professor Dulles is like, "What's going on?" and
This is
Yeah.
This is the part where Niels helped us a bit, because at first we wrote Professor Dulles as this stern professor who was snapping back. What are you doing? Why are you? And there was this contention back and forth. Whereas now
Yeah.
Dulles is like, he's curious more so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
brings it out of Kenna, and he's just like, hey, well, what is this? What,
Yeah.
he said, you can't do this, and what is this? And then he gives him a choice. Sorry, you were talking about it. I get excited about it. You always said I get enthusiastic about stories. I cut
Yeah.
you off.
No,
I
go for it,
apologize.
Marcus. Go for it.
Well, I like that Dulles, he's not actually mad at Kenna. And we write
Mm,
that in where where Kenna, he sees him spiraling down, and there's a moment of empathy on the professor's face.
mm,
And then we say his academic mask slid back into place.
mm,
And he's also like, oh, there's a role I have to play here. There's something I need to do here. And then he tells Kenna, well, it's either you go to the door or you sit down. You make the choice. And that's what the story is about. It's you make a choice.
mm,
And the title of the chapter is The Price of Silence.
mm.
And what does Kenna choose?
Well, he does sit down. He does sit down, but he doesn't. He doesn't fall back in line. He doesn't fall in line. So this feeling, the outer breakdown, and then this inner conflict, inner tension that he's feeling, it eventually he listens to it, right? He starts to listen to it, and he starts to be seen by others,
Hmm.
specifically Professor Amar, and we'll talk about that in the coming chapters. And it is in the seeing, in other people seeing what you're experiencing or feeling what you're experiencing, that allows it to start to come out in more productive ways. Because I think the first two chapters, it's quite, it's quite it's not very graceful, right? It's just like these things that are happening, um, and I feel like our development, our personal development, is not always very graceful. Sometimes it can be rough, right? And there's edges, and there's these hard edges that we go through. But when other people are seeing us and accepting us and allowing us to go through something like this, then it can start to take shape.
Okay.
But I think when it
And
first comes out, it can be awkward, right? It can look awkward. It can feel awkward. It can look very disruptive. But actually, it's the expression of the soul that has been suppressed for just a little bit too long, right? And it's coming out.
mm, in a sense, I guess you could say it's when we provide a home for a place that's reaching out.
Yeah, yeah,
Because coming back to our adjectives again, and like Amarita wrote, acceptance, love, fun, safety. We said belonging, authenticity was said. But when we're secure in ourselves, we can be a home for people who are looking for a home. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I. Oh, what's up? You were gonna go. You were gonna say something.
No, I'm just getting a sense that we've laid out the beginning, and I think maybe created some intrigue
Yeah.
on where this is going to go and how it's going to evolve. So I was just actually wondering if there's anything else, Marcus, that you feel is important to cover in this first conversation.
Well, when he sat back down, or when he stood up, actually, there's this student who looks at him and she nods at him, as in to say, "Yeah, I see you. Like, I get it."
Mm,
He goes to the cafeteria afterwards, and he himself, and again, very introspective. He's stuck while this conversation's going on around him, and everybody leaves. And then he looks across the cafeteria, and there's another person who looks just like him. Um, we spoke about this earlier, but it's shared humanity, not shared
Mm,
suffering, but shared also delight. It's a shared
mm,
experience.
mhm.
And while Kenna sat down and Kenna's going through this, it's like you said, he starts to be seen by others. He starts to be seen when he starts to express himself, because
Mm.
Rosie and Alex are also right there with him. So the last thing I want to mention is, I don't want to say collaboration, but the sense of community, the sense of otherness,
Yeah.
and that Ken is not going through this alone. And nobody in the story is ever going through it alone.
Yeah.
They're
You
able to
know,
process. What's up? Go on.
you know how when you become aware of something, you start to see it everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
or you
Mm-hmm.
start to see more of it. And I feel like it's the same thing here. Like Kenna is has become aware of something within him that now he's able to see it also with the people around him. You know, that scene in the cafeteria. It's like, oh, I can now see that other people are having that same, like, not even with by talking to them, but just sensing into them. There's something similar going on here. There's some kind of a dissatisfaction, or yeah, sort of unexpressed um, yearning, and you can start to see it around you, and then start to feel like, okay, I'm not in this alone. This is not just happening to me. It's yeah, there's sort of a collective thing that's happening, and I feel that that's really important, right? And probably, you know, that is what this story is about as well. It's this shared journey, this shared yearning that the students are feeling.
And and to add on to that, they're feeling it, and I love that Amar gives them. He doesn't give them the tools, nor does he give them permission. Rather, he works with them that they might create the space for other people to express themselves.
Yeah,
And it's by empowering and enabling others that they then empower and enable others.
yeah,
And the gift goes on.
yeah. The gift goes on, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think that's for the next time, right? Where we introduce Omar and how he shows up and the value that he brings to the students. That's going to come up in the third chapter.
Yeah. We will explore that third chapter in our next podcast 1 week from now. Um, you can watch this space on Being at Full Potential on LinkedIn, as well as in the description, we'll have a link to the mailing list as we drip these chapters out bit by bit. Um, yeah, this is it's and maybe we're I'm doing this on the fly now, but we'll maybe bring some people on, such as Monya, who has also illustrated with us, as well as other key players who've been a part of this. We'll reach out to see if they're up for it.
Absolutely. Hey, it's
Yeah.
been a lot of fun, Marcus.
It's great.
It's a new experience. I yeah, I'm enjoying it, and I'm sure that we're going to ease into it as well. Over the course of the next weeks, that we go through the different chapters. But I really appreciate it, and I hope that the people who joined us also had a nice time and got something out of it. Um, yeah. Any closing words on your end?
Um, no, bit by bit, step by step, right? Um, that's how education happens. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been wonderful to be on this journey with you, and looking forward to seeing where it goes. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
All right, Mark. Thank you,
Take
Mark.
care.
All right.